me episode number 434 of Real Life Ghost Stories, and I have 2 spooky stories for you today, and the last story comes from the 20th of December 2024. And story number 1 comes from Emily. My story takes place in the winter of 2006. I was in college studying for a test late into the night, and my roommate returned from a party totally smashed and desperate for Mexican fast food. I felt like I needed a break, so I offered to drive her, especially because that meant she'd buy me a greasy treat too. Our school was in a small desert town in the US, and everything shut down early, save for fast food. So as we were driving around at 2 a.m, the streets were deserted. There's a stretch of road we had to go down that has a median and chain link fence dividing the lanes going east and west. And it is a very wide road, perhaps 4 or 5 lanes on either side. The chain link fence is probably 15 feet high, and this stretch of road goes for at least 2 miles without a light or a break in this super tall fencing. I've no idea why this is the case. It was a super inconvenient road for pedestrians, and I wonder if that was the point for some reason. Anyways, we were about halfway through this stretch of deserted road, no one in sight, when I noticed something bright in my headlights. I slowed down as we got closer and realised it was a woman in white sweatpants and a white sweatshirt. Her hair was a shock of white as well, so my headlights lit her up on the otherwise dark street. She was standing in the middle of the multiple lanes on our side of the road. Her muscles looked as if they had seized up. Her wrists were pressed to her chest, and her hands were at what seemed like very uncomfortable bent angles. Her ear was pressed to her shoulder, and she was looking skyward. The freakiest part of her condition was her mouth was open, almost impossibly wide and at an angle. She was perfectly still. It was like a horror film. I slowed down and almost stopped, but my roommate screamed at me to drive around her. Frankly, my roommate's response scared me as much as the woman did, so I didn't stop and we slowly drove around. My roommate was near tears and I kept saying I thought we should go back. What if she was having a seizure? She was an elderly woman stuck in the middle of the road late at night and might get hit by some stupid drunk driver. My roommate begged me not to, but we really had no choice. We had to go back on that road to head back to campus. I also couldn't live without checking on her. Once we finally hit a light, I did a U-turn to go back. Now we're driving in the opposite direction, so we're on the opposite side of the road from where we saw the elderly woman. Remember, there is a very tall chain link fence. It's been maybe 5 minutes since we saw the woman, and there's possibly a mile of fencing going in either direction from where we saw her. She was somehow on our side of the fence, standing on the sidewalk, staring us down as we drove by. She looked very angry and she was lucid. She was standing on the edge of the sidewalk, bent towards us, and looked like she was either going to run out into the road or topple over. It was a very menacing and unpredictable stance. The fact that I was in a car didn't make me feel much safer. She didn't take her eyes off us as we drove by either. Her whole body seemed to follow our progress, and we were the subject of her full attention. We screamed, and I don't think we stopped screaming until we got back to our dorm in record time and locked the door behind us. What the fuck? Seriously, how the hell did she get over that fence? She was elderly. As a 20-year-old athlete, I wasn't sure that I could have managed to do that. There was no physical way for her to have somehow gotten to the end of the fence, crossed over and returned to her approximate location in the 5 minutes it took for us to find her again. I have no explanation, and that scares me the most. The logical part of my brain felt like it dead-ended, and the other possibilities frightened me too much to truly consider. Was she a ghost? A demon? Or just a grandma with parkour skills? We'll never know. It's been almost 2 decades and I can still see her in my mind's eye. Our college town was rumoured to have more churches per capita than any other in the US, which could have been made up and juggled around by bored college students, but it still stuck in my mind. What if that were true, and it was for a reason? What if there was some kind of evil that liked that specific little spot of desert? This isn't my only freaky story in that town. My school celebrated its centennial while I was in attendance, so I can't help but wonder if otherworldly things got stirred up. There's lots of history there. I think it probably is important to say, right before we get into this story, that of course it is entirely possible that this woman was having some sort of medical episode, and that's how she ended up in that position where her body's all locked up and she's in the middle of the road. Okay? We can all agree that that is a distinct possibility, that people have medical episodes and it can make them look really terrifying. We're not going to gloss over that. We're going to say it's a possibility. We're going to recognize it. And I'm going to say, props to you, Emily, for saying, no, we have to go back, right? Because sometimes people have medical episodes and it can make them appear really scary, and actually what they need is help. And we kind of go, our internal alarm goes off because we're not used to seeing somebody in that state. And we think, I can't possibly get involved in this. But in saying all that, this whole event sounds absolutely terrifying. It sounds petrifying, right down to her being in a white tracksuit. I don't know why that makes this kind of freakier. I'm not really sure why. But how did she get through the fence? How did she get through the chain link fence onto the other side? Unless she climbed over the fence to get to the other side and then she was completely lucid. I mean, for everybody's sake, I kind of hope this was just a grandmother with really good parkour skills, because any alternatives are just pretty terrifying, to be honest. And maybe there was a hole in the chain link fence that you guys just weren't aware of. Maybe, hopefully, that would be, that'd be a nice end to this story. And our second story today comes from Jay. I grew up smack dab in the middle of the Bridgewater Triangle. For those unfamiliar with the region, southeastern Massachusetts possesses one of the most paranormally active and scary places in the US. Stretching from Freetown, Abington and Easton, this region forms a triangle rife with paranormal happenings. Residents of this region report an abnormal amount of UFO sightings, haunted places, swamp men, satanic worship, and many other terrifying phenomena. One of the scariest aspects of this land is an area known as the Hockamock swamp. Native American tribes regarded these wetlands as cursed and would often flee into its depths during the bloody conflict known as King Philip's War. This war between the English colonists and the Native American tribes lasted for years and claimed the lives of over 75% of the Wampanoag, with atrocities committed by both sides. The land itself is stained with the blood of this conflict and centuries of trauma. Not only did I grow up in the middle of the Bridgewater Triangle, my backyard was in the heart of the Hockamock swamp. My brother and I used to explore the swamplands for hours on end. The neighbourhood kids would all play ice hockey on our land when the swamps froze for the winter. Hunters would penetrate deep into its interior for deer. Almost anyone you talk to will usually say the same thing about this swamp. You always feel like you're being watched. Thinking back on it now, camping deep in the woods was probably not a great idea, and we almost always had some type of frightening experience. I suppose we just came to view it as normal. Hearing footsteps running, not walking, past our tents, or the sounds of whispering just soft enough where we couldn't make out what they were saying. We spent our childhood exploring the woods and swamps of the Hockamock, in addition to the land itself being spiritually charged. The house I grew up in was creepy as fuck. The house was built in the late 19th century and served as a farmhouse with a large detached barn in the back. In many ways, I had an ideal childhood. We had a loving and supportive family with a nice old house. Lots of land and woods to explore and lots of tree houses to make. We had countless experiences in that house, which I will detail later. But we never felt like he was trying to scare us. We just chalked it up to the age and history of the land and property. My town was founded in 1711 and is located between Plymouth and Salem colonies. Bay Road connected these two Puritan settlements and is one of the oldest parts of the United States. Newcomers often remark that the area just feels old. Like I said earlier, King Philip used these lands as refuge when hiding from the murderous settlers. In fact, King Philip's Cave is only a mile down the street from my childhood home. As these stories usually go, my brother and I experienced a lot more phenomena than my parents. However, by the time we moved, even my parents had to admit something was up. I want to be clear, the experiences in that house were not the reason we moved. The house was just too old. Well, that and the fact that my dad didn't know how to use a screwdriver led my folks to search for something newer. We were heartbroken. We loved the house, our yard, our pond, our swamp and those woods. I feel like they will always be a part of me. My mother likes to tell the story of when I was a toddler in that house. I would often be speaking to someone in the back room. This is where we had all of our toys. My mother tells us that I would have full-on conversations with someone. This conversation partner loved to make me laugh, and so my mom just thought I was being a goof. We would often come downstairs in the morning, and I do mean every drawer, cabinet and appliance door would be wide open. It gives me chills now just thinking of it. TVs would often turn on when we were upstairs asleep, showers and faucets would turn themselves on, and more creepily off throughout the night. We always just assumed it was him. This is what my older brother and I referred to the ghost as. I'm not sure how we knew it was a male spirit, I guess we just assumed. His presence was always the strongest in the kitchen and the basement. The fucking basement. I know most kids are scared of their basement, but ours was on a different level. The minute you walked down those steps, you instantly felt like you were being watched. Always. I remember one incident when going down the stairs by myself to get a can of paint. I swear to this day, I saw something black in the corner of the basement that still makes me want to run. That's what it always was, something out of the corner of my eye, something black flying across the floor, just fast enough to make you question whether you saw it at all. We had an old Dalmatian. She absolutely refused to go anywhere near that basement. The dog would accompany us throughout the woods, in the barn, the swamps. Anywhere we went, she came along. Never the basement though. No amount of bribing, pushing or even carrying would be enough to get her to go down there. My brother and I knew why she wouldn't go down there, but we could never prove it. Until one day. We were at my brother's basketball game one winter morning and my mother and I started talking to a friend of the family. Her great-great-grandparents, great-uncles, aunts, etc. grew up in that same house. After exchanging pleasantries, the conversation turned to the house. She had spent some holidays there as a child and asked us if we knew about the basement. I almost shit. My mother looked at me and I couldn't speak. The woman, who was a really nice person, told us how her great-great something or other hung himself in the basement after the First World War. It was a story told in their family for generations. We had no idea. Well, I guess I had my suspicions, but this was too much. My mother said nothing to my brother and I on the drive home. While tucking me into bed that night, my mother asked me if I had any questions about what the lady had said today at the basketball game. I told her not really, but asked why someone would do that. She told me that he must have been really sad from everything he had seen in the war. I guess it made me more sad than afraid. At least we had confirmation that the ghost was male. We also just instinctively knew he didn't mean us any harm. As our dog got older, her hips got progressively worse. We had to place 2 large kitchen chairs at the base of our stairs so she wouldn't attempt to climb up the stairs to the bedrooms. By the time she was 13, she could barely walk, never mind climb upstairs. We knew she was suffering and she needed to be at peace. Right before we had to put her down, we heard a loud bang from downstairs, running, and a huge crash of my bedroom door. Our dog, that could barely even walk, was so terrified that she had hurdled the chairs at the bottom of our steps, sprinted up the steps and slammed herself into my door to get into my room. She was cowering and shivering, terrified. My parents came running into my room to see what had happened. They found my dog shaking on my bed uncontrollably. They dismissed it, but she wouldn't under any circumstances go back downstairs until we did in the morning. Needless to say, neither myself nor my dog slept for the rest of the night. Eventually, when I was in middle school, my parents broke the news to us that we were moving. After numerous showings, my parents got an offer on the house. I remember the couple very well. I instantly didn't like them, and I begged my parents not to sell the house to them. Money talks, however, and they went under contract. Being as it was so close to Christmas, my parents asked them if we could move out after Christmas so we could all spend one more holiday in the house. True to my instincts, this couple refused. What made matters worse, they weren't planning on moving in until after the new year. They were just dicks. Just like I thought. Leaving the house was devastating. It was the only house I'd ever known. I felt somehow attached to it. I felt like I belonged there and in the woods. After about a year or so, I came across our old neighbours. Surprisingly, they told us that the house was up for sale. I thought this was strange after such a short amount of time. He said he had only talked to them a couple of times, but he instantly didn't like them either. My town was a working class, salt of the earth New England town. People didn't really like outsiders coming in with money and buying things up. Anyway, my neighbour told me why they had moved. Apparently, the wife was terrified of the house. She swore she had seen a ghost numerous times and wanted to move. My neighbour told me a story that she had shared with him. This lady was rounding the top of the stairs to start walking down when she saw someone walk down the bottom 2 steps, traverse the landing, and then walk through the door out on the screened porch. They put the house on the market the next week. My brother and I like to think that he didn't like the new owners either. It's comforting to think that he wanted them out, but he was okay with us there. We never felt threatened or like he wanted to intentionally scare or harm us. I always got the sense that he was just lonely or sad or both. My brother and I sometimes talk about the house and wonder if he's still there, watching in the basement, or scaring the new owner's dogs. So you will be glad to know that the Bridgewood Triangle is on my list of episodes to do. When will I get around to it? I don't know. But the Bridgewater Triangle is up there. I mean, when you talk about places with this kind of rich history, like the Hockamock Swamp, I hope that's how you pronounce it. You know, my pronunciations can be ropey at best. But these places that are considered like spiritually charged and like hotspots for the paranormal, they honestly blow my mind and I'm fascinated by them. And really, was there anything better when you were a kid than being out in a cursed swamp, in the cursed forest, building dens and whatnot? Those were the days. And I do find it really fascinating that you're living in this house, right? That is obviously on very spiritually charged land. It's got lots of history, lots of trauma, lots of terrible things happened. And you wake up in the morning and all the cabinets, drawers and appliance doors are left open. Like, please. All I can think of is that scene in Sixth Sense where the mum leaves the kitchen for a second and she comes back in and Cole, isn't that his name? Cole is sitting at the table in the same position and all of the cabinets are opened and drawers. And he gets up to leave and there's little sweat marks, like little sweaty handprints because he's been so terrified of whatever has happened in the kitchen when mum has left. That is all I can think of. And it is amazing though as a family what you get used to, where you're like, oh, you know, stuff turns on and off, and you know, him down there in the basement, glimpsing shadowy figures, etc. And it is interesting that obviously, you know, we know that dogs are paranormal beacons. Like they are paranormal detectors. They know when there's ghostly shit going down. Clearly, that dog was aware there was something in that basement and was like, I'm not going down there. It's going everywhere else on the haunted, cursed land, but it's not going into your basement. That is a sure sign there is something otherworldly down there. And you know what it is, right? I'm glad that those people who were unpleasant got their comeuppance. Because it doesn't cost anything to be nice. If you can be a nice person, if you can be a nice human being to other human beings, I do feel like you will get nice things coming your way, okay? So in short, can we please normalize... I hate that phrase. Can we please normalize ghosts giving bad people their comeuppance and staying out of the bedrooms of innocent, unsuspecting young girls? Hatman, I'm looking at you. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. Thank you to Emily and Jay for sending in your stories. Remember, the last story came from the 20th of December 2024. And if you would like to send in your story, you can do so by emailing it to reallifeghoststoriespodcast@gmail.com. You can also check out the website, reallifeghoststoriespodcast.com. And if you are desperate for some extra content, you can subscribe to the Patreon. That is patreon.com/reallifeghoststories, where for $5 a month or $2 a month, you can get access to heaps of extra content and every single main and mini episode completely ad-free. And on that note, I shall see you next time.